I don't have time for all of this. Why is all of the Twitter happening now? I just started my stream. Where were you all motherfuckers before I had my meeting today? Well, thinking about it, I mean, I was up to my neck in shit even then, so... What Discord am I in? I am not in a Discord. I should probably do something about having a Lampe Creative Discord. Yes, I think that's what I'm going to do. I will do it tomorrow when I am not Bubbles the Baby Kraken. Can probably get rid of this please wait screen. I am taking the unmitigatedly foolish risk of a cup of coffee today. But instead of coffee sweetener or anything of the ilk, I will be adding my evening nutrition, which is only ingestible on the grounds that it already tastes like coffee creamer. Coffee creamer mixed with what is quite clearly vitamins and minerals from the flavor. As though to say, dirt. It tastes... Well, I don't know, because I've tasted some dirt I would probably rather have than whatever the fuck this shit is. If it weren't for the fact that this shit is pretty much guaranteed to keep me alive. Although it's not the stuff I'm supposed to have, I recently learned. Oh, burp. Merp. Physics. Fluid dynamics. Very complicated. It's a good thing nobody watches this garbage. I don't know. There's a lot of pressure in having to try to put something out people are going to watch. So I'm always terrified of being rated by somebody who's worth a shit. You just imagine 250 people watching me fuck everything up for 2 hours live. It's probably only a matter of time before one of these streams ends with me vomiting blood and passing out on my desk. People would probably think it's a stunt for the first hour and a half until finally something happens and there are paramedics involved that I can't afford to pay for. Especially now that I have no insurance. This stuff tastes a hell of a lot better with coffee. My God. I guess coffee also kind of tastes like dirt. So there's this, like, blending of muddy flavors that turns the whole thing into some kind of beverage. As opposed to its natural state as hopeless meal replacement in the... That's the opposite of a memento mori. What makes you feel like you can safely assume you can live forever as long as you don't eat solid food? Or keep seeing a doctor, or eat an apple a day. What is that? I mean, the word arrogance comes to mind. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, this is good. I could see people willingly drinking this. It's a huge improvement over the way I'm normally dealing with things. Although I imagine I'll pay later for drinking coffee. I'm trying to get my... If I had known I was going to be damned to a semester in this fucking chair at about one that fit, or moved, to a place I could live. But I don't see how I could. Not unless the university is going to pay me. And as it stands, they're revoking my medical insurance with no explanation, so that doesn't seem very likely. But maybe I'll find a way to die with some dignity. Or at least on stream. That should probably get Lampe Creative some attention. Let's see him not form a This is a citation. Yes, 127. That's the page we're on. 127, top of page. Apparently I'm going to use this. So that's where we might as well start. The other corporeality. That really is the word corporeality. I thought I was jumping the gun on that one. That really is what that says. The other corporeality, once experienced, continues indeed to manifest itself as a body through its changing but always incoordinate gestures. But always concordant gestures, which appresentatively indicate a physical side. This physical side, at first only indicated by appresentation, as in the way it's apprehended, it is presented through apprehension. You apprehend it in this way. Is that what that means? To be fulfilled by original experience. In this way, the other, that would be why this is cited, in this way, an other is apprehensitatively constituted in my monad as an ego that is not I myself, but a second ego which mirrors itself in my monad. This second ego, however, is not simply there and given in and of itself, but is an alter ego. It is another which, in accordance with its constitutive sense, refers back to me. The ego of this alter ego, this other, is nonetheless not simply a duplicate of myself. The alien corporeality that is apprehensive, that is apperceived, is an other, which appears in my monadic sphere, above all, in the mode of the there, while my own body is in the mode of the absolute here. That which becomes apprehensated in this way does not derive from my own sphere of peculiarity. It is a coexistent ego in the mode of the illic, and therefore an alter ego. Why do I have to come to this for that statement? This is fucking exactly what I need. This section right here, this paragraph, is miraculous. But why am I coming to a collection of philosophical essays on the social sciences by Thomas Luckman? What the fuck, Lepe? Mirrors exist. Why is this happening? Why is this where I find it? I feel like that's something that should be considered central to any number of things that I took for granted. What? Philosophy tube is fine. The point I'm trying to make here, though, is that I feel like I should have been reading Schutz's Otherness if he's got a statement like that. That sounds to me like the thesis statement of a book that is hugely important within the realm of phenomenology. Does such a book exist? I would quite like to read a book like that. It seems like even that is just such a small part of the rest of this piece, too. Although I wish I could recall more of it. Okay, let's continue on anyway. The first communality which exists between me, the primordial psychological I, and the appresentatively expressed other, and which forms the foundation of all other intersubjective communities of a higher order, is the community of nature, which belongs not only to my primordial sphere, but also to that of the other. There is, however, the difference that the other's world of nature is seen as illic from my point of view, which is to say that the other gets that aspect from it, which I should get if I myself were not hic but illic. In this way, every natural thing, which is experienced, or which can be experienced in my primordial sphere, obtains a new appresentative stratum, namely, as the same natural thing, in the possible manners of its givenness for the other. So we understand what it is that we're seeing when we encounter the other because of what we are familiar with in and of ourselves. I think that has a lot to do with why we wind up with people, especially in philosophy, speaking for everyone when they speak of their experience. Because this is sort of how you think about it, right? You just presuppose that your experience can be... What's the word I'm looking for? I want to say imposed. That doesn't seem like it's the right thing to say, though. It can be... It can be taken for granted as the experience people are going to have. But to some extent, you have to be willing and able to accept that that's the case, because if you don't, then you also aren't taking into consideration that the way that you apprehend the existence of the other is through the world that the two of you are currently sharing. And that shared world is also going to impose itself, just like it does on your own psychology, upon that of the other, right? So you're not just taking for granted that this is true. You're also taking for granted that their worldview... Basically what I'm getting to is ideology exists. And it exists in the shortcut kind of way that I'm usually talking about. And this is why. So this essay is also going to be useful for addressing Zizekian concerns that come out of this project, because we have a tendency to vilify the concept of ideology. But part of how and why ideology is something we engage in also involves the... Empathy is probably not the right word, but the recognition of the other as a conscious entity deserving of the kind of respect and dignity we would expect for ourselves comes with the ideology as well. It's a lot harder to find the separation between those things than we are probably likely to take for granted is the case. Because the way that we apprehend the world around us is also the way that we apprehend the other. It sort of has to be, unless we engage in the reductionism that phenomenology represents. And this is a very... I mean, it's not tangential, really. It is part of what Schutz is talking about here. But the reason why I think that it's worth stopping to discuss that is that it means that we can't just say, if we are objective about other people's rights, privileges, dignities, existences, that we are stepping out of ideology when we do it. And in fact, if we completely step outside of ideology, we probably aren't going to be taking for granted the value or identity of the other. We're actually going to wind up in a position where we're likely to objectify the other within a world, reduce their personhood to objecthood, because we are reducing the human element out of the equation when we are also reducing the ideology out of the equation. Because it's actually the preconception that we can take for granted that their worldviews are going to be similar to our own that leads to us seeing them as people. And it's easier to dehumanize somebody that doesn't share our worldview, which has a lot to do with how the us and them dichotomy exists. That's not something I'd really considered before, because it means that the entire project of objectifying, seeing in a scientific way the relationships we have to other people, runs the risk of dehumanizing the other in a different sort of way, where our default is non-social. Our default becomes, in a manner of speaking, antisocial in and of itself, which means that the process is to some degree antisocial. That adds a layer of complication to this project. That's something that we should very carefully consider going on, not only in this, but in various other things as well. I wonder what to do about it. I suppose the obvious answer is to let the others speak for themselves. It's one of the reasons why I have a tendency not to weigh in much on things about race and feminism, because I know race theorists who have been through the, well, life within their race, frankly. And I know feminist theorists who are women. And I want to empower them to speak for themselves rather than to try to speak for them. I think that might be a way of going forward. That's the praxis of the theory. That's how you could do this in a practical way. Now, what that also means is that using Simone de Beauvoir to talk about otherness because they're doing so from the position of having been otherized as a woman might not be sufficient. I need to find somebody who can do that in race as well. But most of the people I would ordinarily go to would actually be turning the table toward a discussion of the intersectionality of race and class. I wonder if there's a way that I can do that without just defaulting to having Sapolsky talk for the other in that case, which is sort of my current plan. I don't know if that's an acceptable approach anymore. I don't know. Maybe I'll ask Fructoso and see what he has to say about it. Or Blaze, maybe. In this way, I reduce the universe of my conscious life to my own transcendental sphere. Oh no, that's 2 pages ago. I thought I had turned the page. I have not turned the page. Starting from myself as the original constitutive monad, I thus get other monads, that is, others as psychophysical subjects. Those others are not merely related by means of associative pairing to my psychophysical being in their capacity as being bodily opposite me. Rather, it is a question of an objective equalization, a mutual interrelatedness of my existence and that of the others. For, as the body of the other is presented to me as another, so my body is experienced by the other as his other, and so forth. The same thing obtains for all subjects, that is, for this open community of monads which Husserl has designated as transcendental intersubjectivity. It should be stressed that this transcendental intersubjectivity exists purely in me, the mediating ego. It is constituted purely from the source of my intentionality, but in such a manner that it is the same transcendental intersubjectivity in every single human being. Only in other subjective manners of appearance, in his intentional experiences. In this constitution of the transcendental intersubjectivity, that of the single and uniformly objective world is also executed, and, along with it in the constitution of those particularly mental objectives, especially those types of social communities which have the character of personalities of a higher order. Of special importance for our topic is the constitution of the specifically human, and that means cultural worlds in their particular manner of objectivity. According to Husserl, accessibility for everyone belongs in essence to the constitutive sense of nature, a corporeality and of the psychophysical human being. But the world of culture is of a limited kind of objectivity, and with this it should be borne in mind that the life world is given to me, and to everyone who retains the natural attitude primarily in his cultural world, namely, as a world of signification, from which the human being in question historically takes part in forming. The constitution of the world of culture, similar to the constitution of any world, including the world of one's own stream of existence, has the lawful structure of a constitution oriented with respect to a null point, or nullglide? Nullglied? Nullglide? I'd pronounce it nullglide just because I think it sounds cool. But it's probably nullglied, or the E would be at the end. I have no... I mean, it might also be German. I don't know anything about German. I.e., to a personality. The constitution of the world of culture, similar to the constitution of any world, including the world of one's own stream of experience, has the lawful structure of a constitution oriented with respect to a null point, i.e., a personality. Here am I and my culture. It is accessible to me and to my cultural companions as a kind of experience of others. Other cultural humanity and other culture can become accessible only by a complicated process of understanding, namely, on the basic level of the common nature, which, in its specific spatio-temporal structure, constitutes the horizon of being for the accessibility to all the manifold cultural phenomena. As nature is thus concretely and uniformly constituted, so human existence itself is referred to an existent world, a life world as a realm of practical activity, which, from the first, is endowed with human significations. All this, in principle, accessible to the explication of the phenomenological constitutive analysis which, proceeding from the apodictic ego, must finally reveal the transcendental meaning of the world in its full concretion. That's an interesting choice of word. Which is continuous life world to all of us. So what I think this is saying is that as something is within the realm of personality, it also includes with it all of the things that we take for granted as being the source of normalcy within that personality. And we're not necessarily going to start trying to pick out what elements those are, even though we're going to see that there are different elements in an othered population. I can see how my culture is different from another person's culture, but the reason that I can see how they are different is because of the things I can see between us, which are the same. And those things have a tendency to be reduced to nature. Now, I would call into question whether or not that's done legitimately. I would argue that in most cases it is not, especially if we're talking about the sort of boots on the ground epistemology, which is to say the way that the man in the street thinks about the other man in the street he comes across when it's a banker crossing the path of a biker, right? These people can take for granted things that are the same or different about the shared elements of their social reality. That doesn't mean that the banker actually knows anything about his own reality, right? Like, there's no reason to assume that he does. But between the two of them, there's going to be a shared draw toward either that thing which nature gives us that is the groundwork from which we build culture, so like human DNA, for example, or from something that we are going to take for granted as being natural, regardless of whether or not it is. But nonetheless, we're apprehending the existence of the other through a shared relationship to nature, which is also something we can use to highlight those things between us which are different. If we didn't have the thing between us which was the same, they would be so alien that nothing about them would be comparable, I wouldn't think, to what it is that we do. And that might not make a lot of sense at first. But if you think about it, if you don't have any common ground to start from in analysis, then all that you have is something that you can't share part of the identity of humanity with, right? This would be something so alien that you can't communicate, for example, although there's plenty of people with which we can't communicate now. There is something about this that's really concrete in my mind that I'm not getting to right now, trying to explain it out loud. I would probably have been better off trying to write it out. But then I'd come back to it in 2 weeks, read it, and then be able to put it into words. As it stands, I'm just going to hit this coffee really hard and hope that that helps. Maybe take another hit of nicotine. I hate being on the edge of an insight that I can't put into words. Add 3? What do you mean add 3? Oh my god. Can the assertion be justified that positive sciences have naively substituted ideas for the life world, and thus have lost the connection with their basis of meaning, in view of the unquestionable success of natural science, and especially of mathematical physics, in the control of the life world? That is the question we are still trying to answer. And I completely forgot about that. So, let's see what Schutz has come up with as a response to that concern. It was stated above that the natural sciences, generally and especially the natural sciences which use mathematics, have lost their relation to the basis of meaning, namely the life world. This would probably be Professor Scarrett's argument, and I'm already quite inclined to agree. And I'm pretty sure that I remember C. Wright Mills saying something similar as well. How can this reproach be justified when it has just been shown that it is precisely this universal nature which constitutes itself concretely and uniformly in intersubjectivity? That sounds like my thing about how the ideology is the source of this, and so we can definitely call into question whether or not it's nature that is responsible for the shared elements. Pure ideology, probably, I think. Pure ideology. If you are not aware of the fact that you are dismantling an ideological structure, you are probably acting within it. Where's your shovel, sir? We must get digging. We may reply, first of all, that nature, as the object of the natural sciences, does not mean precisely the same thing as nature as a constitutive element of the life world. Oh yeah, let's make it more complicated, shall we? That which the naively living human takes for natural reality is not the objective world of our modern natural sciences. His conception of the world, as valid for him in its subjectivity, obtains with all its gods, demons, etc. Nature, in this sense, is an element of the life world, is thus a I thought that was conceit, it's concept. Concept, spelled in a way I have never seen spelled. Thus a concept which has its place exclusively in the mental, geistig, sphere. It constitutes itself in our everyday meaningful experience as the experience develops in our historically determined being.